What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And this I want to break down what's happening with Tesla SPY and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's going on with the economic calendar moving forward, some very important factors involving the markets that you should be watching for as time progresses. But before I begin devil's information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Webull and deposit $500, you're guaranteed 20 free stocks, and the offer ends very soon in just about 5 hours from now. Anyways, now let's break down what's happening with the markets. As you guys can see, SPY's been on a bit of a downtrend right here as we had this top around this 550 area. Since then, it's been dipping all the way down towards this support at 543, only to rebound a bit, establish a lower high, then continue to drop lower. We also had this little pump today that happened in the morning when SPY started pushing all the way up towards 547. But I mentioned to everyone, made a video where I said that this is likely going to be a fake pump, and we're likely going to see some downside after that because SPY was down. It was balanced to essentially establish a lower high, and we saw some bearish signals that suggest that this would likely be a trap. So that did end up playing out. So we did end up seeing this, this little trap for a lot of the bulls, only for this to continue lower. And this was a very, very good looking short entry, in my personal opinion. That's where I entered. But the question is, what's going to happen from here? What is my personal opinion? I'll break down more information about this just in a few minutes. But let's first talk about some data for tomorrow. As you guys know, we have Bowman from the Fed giving a speech tomorrow at 7 o'clock a.m., tomorrow being Tuesday, June 25th, 2024. Bowman is known for being the most hawkish Fed speaker, so what they say could cause some volatility. So we'll wait and see what they end up saying. After that, we just have some home prices and very minor data, but then starting around 10 o'clock a.m., that's when things become a lot more serious. At 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 30 minutes after the market opens, we have the consumer confidence reports, some manufacturing numbers from the Richmond Fed, and services numbers coming out from the Dallas Fed as well. So that means there's going to be quite a bit of volatility coming, and we're going to be seeing more data coming out between 10 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. So that's about 30 minutes and 1 hour after market open. Then we have Cook giving a speech from the Fed and very, very minor pieces of data. Everything else is just minor. Nothing else will be too crazy, but I just want to note these things, which will be very important. Now, something else worth noting is that when it comes to earnings whispers, I wanted to note that for Tuesday, we have FedEx announcing their earnings tomorrow. That's going to be after the market closes. Everything else is very minor. Then we have Paychecks and General Mills on Wednesday, not to mention Nike on Thursday. Let me just note that with all these different stocks out there and all these different earnings, I wouldn't necessarily be way too concerned just yet. I think that once we get to the end of this quarter, once this weekend, that's going to be the end of Q2, by the way. Once June is over, this is the last week of June, and then next week and within the next 2 weeks, I'd say we have a lot of important earnings coming out, like big tech and such. We're going to start off with finance, with lots of these big banks, and we'll be very careful considering what has been said about them very recently about their preparation for different hedges and stuff. There's been a lot of criticism for banks very recently because of the fact that they're not as properly hedged and prepared for financial crises. So that's something that I'm seeing on headlines. So we'll see how things go next week with things like that coming out. And don't forget that commercial real estate's in a more dire place with these high interest rates, and that could be like a black swan event. So I just want to just kind of briefly mention those things. I'm not going to say that it's going to cause anything for this week specifically, but those are just some things to keep in mind. Moving forward, when it comes to the fear and greed index, right now things are more fearful in terms of sentiment. That's because of how the market was so overvalued, at least in the eyes of lots of investors. Now we're seeing sellers continuing to dominate. On top of this, market momentum is still on extreme greed. Why? Because we're still well above our 125 daily moving average. The market is still on a massive uptrend when you zoom out all the way. Just because we're on a big uptrend doesn't mean we're green every day. There could still be little corrections. There could be pullbacks. And that's what we're seeing right now. As of right now, we're just seeing a little pullback. We'll see if it, turns into something bigger once we get like bank earnings and such. But for now, that's what I just wanted to call out. So momentum is still at extreme greed because the market is still in an uptrend. But the emotion right now, the emotion is still fear because of the fact that the market's been overvalued and sellers are starting to step in. So that's something that's worth noting. If the market were to tank really hard, then momentum would turn a lot more fearful. Right now, we're not there yet. We just dropped a bit on SPY. We're only about like 7-8 points away from the all-time high. So that's the reason why. And then also, the puts and call option positioning is still kind of flat right here. We did see some call buying. Could people have started to buy calls because they ended up seeing that little pump? So that's something kind of funny. We are starting to see a little bit of a shift right here. It seems like a lot of investors are still hedging in the middle. We're not really seeing too much conviction on one side, and there's still not a whole lot of shorts entering the market like we've seen before yet. So we'll have to give that some more time. And then volatility for the VIX is still trending upwards, approaching our 50 daily moving average. This means that the VIX is gaining more momentum. It's continuing to climb. It hasn't broken key resistance yet, but it's showing some strength. Anyways, what does all of this mean for the market? What's my personal opinion? So basically for SPY, I went over two possibilities in my video yesterday. If you guys watched it, yesterday was Sunday. I was talking about this. So I said SPY is either going to see a little pullback or we could pop and try to fill this gap and then get the pullback. Those were the two main possibilities. This morning, I was thinking, I was kind of in the middle in the morning. And then during the afternoon video, I said that, as we were pumping a bit, I said that this could be a trap. So I said that I made a video called Fake Pump and up how I brought up how this could just be, a fake pump, and we're likely going to see downside, and that's what most likely happened. That's what ended up happening, and that's going to be pretty wild if anything, from the way things are looking. So, in my opinion, we pumped to fill this gap. Now we're kind of rejecting, and there is a risk of more downside, at least for SPY on some very, very critical time frames. If we look at the 4 hour time frame, we haven't really touched our 50 EMA yet. And I think we're going to most likely do that. So I'll be watching basically a key resistance right here. We have 543 is the low from Friday's one resistance, and also 544. That's the critical resistance we tested for the last 2 days. Now it's going to become our resistance that was support. So those are going to be your two resistance levels, the two main ones. And if we fail to get back above 544, we're going to likely kind of like pop and continue to dip. Losing 542.5. If we end up failing to hold that, I think we could come all the way down to the 540 area. So 540.8, 540.5, around that zone. That's going to be our next target. A bigger drop would be coming because of the weakness that we are seeing. On top of this, as we kind of pumped and dumped and grabbed liquidity, that's another sign of weakness because the daily looks very bearish. So this suggests that more downside is very probable, right? It's been a long time since we got a candlestick that looked like that on SPY, where we got a nice little pump and dump. In fact, that hasn't happened in a long time. It doesn't guarantee anything, but it does suggest that the sellers are gaining the edge. So what I presume is going to happen tomorrow is this. Just to be frank, if we break past 544, yes, we could actually pump more. If we fail to hold above 542.5, I'm expecting us to get all the way down to 540. Those are your important levels. What do I think is going to happen? I favor us dipping towards 540 very soon because we have a very bearish looking candle. We're seeing bearish momentum building, and SPY got a big rejection as signals remain more bearish. So we're going to likely dip to 540 going into tomorrow, if not within the next 2 days. That's what I favor. For Bitcoin, for those who are interested, this is also going to likely dip a little bit lower. My target is the 58,000 area right over here. This is also aligned with our daily 200 EMA. So I think that 58,000 is coming. So look for a little bit of a dip on Bitcoin. How about Nvidia? Nvidia is looking kind of weak on the daily time frame, especially as we have these gaps to fill. We have this big gap down here, but I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm going to be focusing on this one. Because we're below 116, well, it depends on if we can hold below 120 or not. If we get a nice little bounce and break past 120, yes, we could turn back to bullish. If we fail to do so, if we get a little back test, because I think that Nvidia might try to pop a bit before it continues lower. If we do fail to break past 120, then look for a continuation down, and we could be dipping all the way down towards 115. And if that fails, this will be dipping all the way down to about 110. So I favor downside a bit more on Nvidia, looking at the way things are looking. On the 4 hour time frame, we're also looking more bearish, and that's where we get like new targets such as like 107 if we lose 110. So I'm seeing more downside momentum that's still building. There's no sign of this actually bouncing yet. We have previous resistance that's going to be support right here at 115. I think Nvidia could retest this. We'll see if we get a little pop or not. And if we, as long as we're below 120, we're going to likely continue to dip towards 110 and eventually 107. So I do favor the downside. We could pop first and then start dropping, but that's looking more probable, a little bit more downside. For Tesla, Tesla's looking kind of weak on the 4 hour time frame. We got a nice little pump all the way up towards 188, the exact level we called out before it started to dip. Now I see 180 as key support. I think Tesla is going to revisit 180, and we'll see if we hold this because we are kind of hovering above our 50 EMA right here. So I think Tesla's going to dip towards 180, then try to rebound and just kind of consolidate tomorrow because we are slowing down on volume and Tesla's beginning to slow down. I think that we may continue to consolidate a bit before we get some big moves towards the end of the week as we approach deliveries. Deliveries come out for Tesla going into next week. Tesla will announce their Q2 deliveries. I think that we might dip a little bit for now on Tesla towards 180, then consolidate for a bit as we're getting very, very tight and we're forming a pennant. And a big move will most likely come soon, possibly to the upside. Oh, and by the way, guys, one more thing about Tesla is this. When you zoom out, we're still bullish. Our structure still looks more bullish on Tesla. We got a nice accumulation, a nice inverse head and shoulders. So it looks bullish heading into its deliveries as long as we hold these levels. So we'll see if that ends up being the case for Tesla. But just know that that's a more medium term projection. For the super short term, I just see a little dip coming to 180. We'll see if we bounce or not. I'll be watching that very carefully. For the triple Q, we have resistance currently around 474.15. If that breaks, we'll be looking at 476. And if we fail to hold this, we'll be tipping all the way down towards 472.5. And if that fails us, we have an imbalance to fill all the way down towards 468, not to mention a gap. So the QQQ is looking weak on the 4-hour. On the daily chart, we have this big gap to fill. I think we're going to fill this most likely at around 468. So I think tomorrow, because we're at very close to our key EMA, we're going to likely see some buyers try to defend, at least attempt to temporarily. For a little pop before we continue lower, and we'll be looking to see a retest of our 20 EMA towards 468. So I favor that as the most likely possibility. A little pop and drop and a gap fill down here. I think the QQQ will most likely do that. For Apple stock, on the daily chart, we're looking a little weak. We are seeing some buyers defending, and the reason for this is because we approached the 4-hour 50 EMA. So we approached key support on Apple. We're actually trying to hold it. Apple may consolidate for a bit, but there is still that risk of downside on the daily. I think tomorrow we're going to retest 210, come back down, just trade kind of sideways, and there could still be a risk of downside if we lose 206.9. If we lose the 206s, I'd be expecting a big drop to 202 on Apple if we end up losing key support. So I'll be watching for that. We're still holding 206, so we'll see how it goes, but there is still that risk. That is still very prevalent. All right, guys. So that's it for the main tickers I typically talk about in lots of detail. We're going to go over a speed run for the rest of these. So please bear with me. Palantir got a nice little bounce here. It was actually looking kind of weak only to get bought back up. The 4 hours showing some life now. I'm going to be looking at 24.4. Thanks to the bullish news that came out, we got a little rebound. I think we retest 24.4. If we break this, we're going all the way up towards 25. If we fail to do so, we're going to be retracing back down to 22. Look for a pop, and then we'll see if we get a rejection or not. Overall, it is showing some life. Now, one could also argue we have a head and shoulders like structure. Like this could be like our left shoulder. This could be our head. Maybe our right shoulder is about to form. We'll see. But I do think it's going to push a little bit higher before we see some tough resistance. We may get very close to 25. Supermicro is looking a little bit more bearish right here. We got this nice little liquidity grab, and we failed to hold key support. So I think this imbalance will fill. I think we're going down to 780. I favor that a bit more. We'll see what happens though, because we still have to get past another important support, which is going to be the 800 area. I think we could retest 800 tomorrow. If we lose that, 780 is coming. If we hold that, we could bounce, but I favor the downside in my opinion. For Rivian, on the 4-hour, Rivian is pushing upwards. As long as we hold, let me just double check this, 10.8. If we hold that, then yes, we could rebound. If we lose 10.8, we're going to be dipping all the way down towards 10.5. My gut tells me it's going to dip a bit, hold this, and try to bounce and start pushing all the way up towards 11.25. But overall, we're looking pretty good. The 4-hour is showing some life, and we'll have to see how things go. But not bad whatsoever in my opinion. For SofI, the 4-hour is showing some life. We did call a bounce yesterday. I think we're going to continue to go up towards 6.62. So I see a little bit more upside as the most likely possibility. If we lose 6.46, then yes, we'll be dipping lower. But I think that we're not ready to dip yet. I think 6.62 looks more probable. For the IWM Russell 2000, we were talking about a little rebound coming, but I was worried it could reject. We did rebound. We didn't reject yet. We're actually holding up. So we're fighting some tough resistance. We have resistance around 201.35 and 202.31. If we break through these, there's going to be a bigger push coming. If we fail and lose 200.69, we'll be dipping back down lower. My gut tells me this is going to try to push a little bit. We look a little bit more bullish on SoFi relative to the market. Sorry, not SoFi, the IWM. Excuse me, guys. The IWM is looking a bit more bullish. So that looks to me like it might be pushing towards 202 again. For AMD, AMD is looking a little bit more bearish. I think it's going to be dipping down towards 158 because we closed below. We dropped below 160 in the after hours. So I think we might be looking for a retest of 158, and we'll see if that holds or not. If it doesn't hold, we'll be dipping down to 156. So look for a little bit more downside. For ARM, we're looking a little bit more bearish. We have this bearish looking 4-hour time frame structure right here. So I think we could be dipping all the way down towards 148. And if that fails us, we'll be dipping down to this imbalance around 140. So I favor the downside as we're losing our 50 EMA, and we're going to likely continue to fall here. So I see that as a strong possibility. If we break past 151, then yes, we could rebound a bit, but I don't favor that. I think we're most likely going to continue to fall. I think that we could be dipping a little bit lower towards the support around the 148 area, and then eventually lower levels. So I see a little bit more bearish momentum building on ARM. For Coinbase, Coinbase is looking like it's been dipping quite a bit. It might try to rebound here because it grabbed liquidity. So there might be a retest of about 218 or so, and then we'll see if we hold that or not. If it breaks through 218, then we could go a little higher. If you reject off 218, we're going to be dipping even lower. The structure is still bearish overall. There's no sign of a true bounce yet. We could rebound a little bit, but there's not going to be a massive change in structure. It's still just a counter trend dead cat bounce that's coming. So we'll see what it develops into. Look for a bounce towards 218, but is it going to be a big bounce to turn this around? I can't say that. We could just establish a lower high and continue lower. Look for a test of 218 and we'll see what happens from there. For Amazon, we're looking a little bit weak on the 4-hour time frame. We're going to be looking for a dip towards 184.75. If we lose this, we'll be dipping down to 182. If we hold this, we could rebound, but my gut tells me we're going to be dipping lower. For Meta is also kind of like building some momentum here on the 4-hour time frame. We are making higher highs and higher lows. If we break past 500, we're going to be looking for a push all the way up towards 50, basically 504. If we lose 496, we'll be dipping all the way down towards 492, then 490. But in my personal opinion, I think that because we're holding structure and we're looking nice on the 4-hour, Meta might try to go a little higher, outperform the market to retest 500, then possibly reject. I'll be watching for a bit of a push first before it makes its way back down. So we could retest 500 to 502. If we don't continue to hold those levels, then there could be rejection coming. So like a pop and drop, kind of like what we saw on SPY today. That is what we could be seeing on Meta tomorrow. But that depends on how well we end up holding up. For Microsoft, we're showing a little bit of weakness here. I think that's because we ended up losing that support. I think we're going to be retesting 446. If 446 fails us, we're dipping down to 444. If we hold this, we could rebound, but my gut tells me it's going to dip a little bit lower. Let's just double check this. Google is just trading kind of sideways within a range. If we lose the support at 180, we'll be tipping all the way down towards 179. And if we rebound, we'll be looking at 182 as resistance. So because we're trading sideways in this range, there is a chance that Google may retrace a bit. So it depends on if we hold 180. We're holding up well, but I am seeing some signs that momentum is slowing down. So just be careful. Watch 180 as key support. If we lose that, we will be dipping lower. If we hold it, then we could just continue to consolidate. So that's going to be your very important level on Google. For GameStop's looking kind of weak, technically speaking. I do see this thing potentially dipping to 22, so we'll see what it does here. Looking a bit more bearish. AMC is going to be dipping a little bit lower towards 4.35 to fill its gap. Then we'll see a bounce after that probably, but it's going to be kind of minor. The VIX is still hasn't broken the 4-hour 200 EMA. It's still on an uptrend, still showing some life, and I think that it may continue to try to break out. We have to give it some time though, just to be safe. For the 10-year treasury yield, we're just shuffling. We'll see what the Fed speakers cause. And the dollar is kind of flat right now, but it's actually on an uptrend. So it could bounce, and this could lead to the market tipping lower. So we'll give this some time. It doesn't look like it's done with the full measured move. This looks like a nice accumulation, so it might continue to uptrend, which is bearish for the markets. So the signals points towards the market eventually going lower, which could slow things down. Will this last 3 months? No. Will it last 4 months? I can't say that, right? I can't say anything like that. This is just for the time being. This may last just like another couple of days, another week. So that's all I'm seeing for now, and that's what I'm projecting. I'm not talking like 6 months into the future. We're just talking about tomorrow mainly and the shorter term. So that's what I'm seeing on the charts, guys. I want to thank you all so much for listening. Please have an absolutely incredible rest of the day, and I'll see you guys very soon on the next one. Thank you for listening, and peace out.